Hey everyone, I'm Lady Emerald, and today I'm coming to you all as a weaver of history, astrology, and religion. Today we're going to be talking about Pluto in Aquarius and religious synchronism. Throughout all of this, you may be seeing things pop up around me to clarify or to give like deeper definition as we talk and go through history talking about this. And as we go closer to modern times, you're going to hear me shift more into focusing on the African diasporic religions, especially Hoodoo, as we get into this current transit of Pluto in Aquarius. Now, before we get into what I'm seeing with the Pluto in Aquarius transits as I look at history, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Pluto as a planet. Although currently astronomy says it's not really one of our main planets in the solar system, Pluto, we still love you no matter if you are a dwarf planet, okay? And what Aquarius stands for, how that all comes together, and I'm going to break down some other things. Also will be nodding to some other videos, other posts, or other astrologers to look into if you want to dive deeper into this type of stuff, this type of mundane astrology, as we really continue to reshape society currently, right? So let's get into it. Pluto is a generational planet. What we call in astrology, or how I use Pluto, is a generational planet. So we can track kind of the generations and what they stand for with Pluto. And Pluto is a planet of deep transformation. And what that means is that truly it just means change for the betterment of you. Some people transform backwards, who cares? Like, as long as it's happening, it's going to make you come to terms with a deeper sense of your shadows and how that interacts with the society around you. And so Aquarius, right, an air sign that is called the water barrier and focuses on humanitarianism, has strict boundaries. Okay, so that's why sometimes your Aquarius friends are like that. It really represents in like innovation and not necessarily technology, because technology is represented by Mercury. So when we start thinking about technology, we really want to lean towards those zodiac signs or constellations that are assigned to Mercury, which is Gemini and Virgo. But Aquarius is really about innovation, and in modern astrology is ruled by Uranus, the planet of rebellion and going against the grain of what's currently going on in upheaval. But in traditional astrology, it is ruled by Saturn. So that is a quick breakdown of Pluto in Aquarius. But Pluto in Aquarius brings in a deeper look into innovation with humans in mind. It does not really have the betterment of humans in mind and the balance between humans and the rest of nature. We see what's happening, right? And so with Pluto in Aquarius, we are asking, how do we improve X, Y, and Z for the betterment of society as a whole? So a lot of things, as Pluto really situates itself permanently into Aquarius, is we're asking these things as a civilization. We're asking this as a society. Like, what does this really look like to move forward, right? In the most humane way. So if you did not know, I co-host a podcast with Liz Flo called Astro, Negro, Astro and Black. It is everywhere that you can get, or you can listen to a podcast, even here on YouTube. I'm going to link our Pluto in Aquarius episode where that whole podcast really focuses on the Black diaspora, specifically Black Caribbean and Black American correlations in history, connections with astrology. So very much so a cultural lens versus what you may typically get with astrology. So check that out if you want to learn more about Pluto in Aquarius. Now, let's get into like synchronism and what is religious synchronism. So synchronism is this combination of different forms of beliefs. I say beliefs, theories, and practices dealing with anything your beliefs and practices. So religious synchronism is where you merge the beliefs of anything with religion, spirituality, and I would even say you synchronize, right? You combine, but you also define. You're really definitive in it. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more as I go through what has happened in history. Now, religious synchronism, we see it all the time. Without religious synchronism, you will not have the many denominations of the major world religions. So Christianity, Judaism, Taoism, Hinduism, and like Islam. Like without religious synchronism, we would never have the many denominations within those major religions. Now, a thing I want to call Hoodoo synchronism is the combination of different forms of beliefs and practices of Hoodoo as it continues to evolve for the survival and thriving of Black Americans. Now, if we really want to get into the weeds of it, Hoodoo is a Black American ethno-religion. If you're not Black American as a descendant of enslaved peoples in the United States, you cannot practice it. It is a closed religion. Now, we do know with more people interacting with the African diasporic religions, there are more people who are trying to find their roots, their spiritual grounding. And so there has been some pushback about it. And I'm here to tell you, you can stop it right there. It is a closed religion. Please, please, please give honor to those who practice closed religions. Please respect those religions. And also, if you disrespect those religions, why do you think, or how do you think those spirits of that religion would want to work with you? That's just my little 2 cents about that. So we know what Pluto and Aquarius is. We know what religious synchronism is. We even what I'm calling Hoodoo synchronism. So let's really jump into the meat and potatoes of this video. Okay, y'all, so we're going to first start off at the very beginning. Not beginning of time, but beginning of what we call the AD era, right? One of the first ways we can start to kind of see religious synchronism happen in modern times starts between 58 and 83 AD. That is that Pluto in Aquarius transit, where we have the fire rebellion. I will put all like the notes and everything and where I gathered a lot of my sources and information from for like all the historical parts. They will be down in the description box. But 58 to 83 AD, where we get what historians call the fire rebellion. So with the Jewish rebellion against the Roman Empire, it is the destruction of Jerusalem and the Second Temple. And the revolt led to the strengthening of the separation between Judaism and Christianity. Because if people know their history correctly, Judaism is really the mother religion that then birthed through these times we're going to be talking about, really then started to kind of birth Christianity and Islam. And this is why, they are called the Abrahamic religions, because they serve or are supposed to serve one God. They just all have different prophets. Judaism's prophet is Moses, Christianity is Jesus, and Islam is Muhammad. Those are just the main differences. And so during this time, we see this synchronizes, right? This coalition of beliefs that say, my belief is this. So I'm going to further go away from Judaism, and we're going to continue to create Christianity. And it symbolized like the struggle and the need for independence from government, and like this really true definitive action, this definitive part of creating this newer religion. And it also signified this rebellion against an imperial empire, because the Roman Empire was imperialistic, right? We all know this. And because of this, this further separation and this definitive separation of Judaism and Christianity, we get early Christianity disrupting the status quo during this time of the Roman Empire, right? Now, outside of the European views and lens, during that time, we also start to see Buddhism reaching China through the Silk Road. We start to see the cultural fusion, right? The combining of things and cultures, religions, and beliefs, and more of this cultural exchange happened due to the Silk Road. And from there, Buddhism entered China. Then we saw a rise in I am going to butcher this name, so I'm gonna put it on the screen. Neo They're like the Pythagoras. Basically, during this, there starts to be more of an attraction to some of the bigger pagan gods that we see coming back up, like Dionysus, Mithras. There's a newer rise in this neo-paganism during the Roman Empire and in parts of Eastern Europe. Now, also during this time, astrology started to really take hold, right? And the reformation of astrology. So that's Babylonian, Egyptian, and traditional astrology, which we now really call Hellenistic, means more Hellenistic, starts to form and take a bigger hold as well. So we see all these belief systems start to coalesce and start to be definitive of what they are, and these separations become with combinations and definitiveness. Now, what we know about, for astrologers who are watching, what we know about Aquarius, that kind of rings true, right? About needs to be definitive in things. Now, after that time in Pluto and Aquarius, we move into the 300s. So Pluto in Aquarius takes about 240 something years, about 250 years, to make a complete rotation around the sun. So we get to Pluto in Aquarius again between 305 and 330 AD. So it does, and it's stuck in Aquarius for a good little minute, 20 something years during this time period. And we have Constantine, so the person who really solidified the current traditions of Christianity. So Constantine the Great in Constantinople pushed Christianity to its limelight, and so it is during this time we get most of the current Christian doctrine, and that was through decision making of the government. Right? They're the ones who said certain Bible stories get to stay and some get to be pushed out. This is where we saw a bigger push of construction of churches, this forcing of people to convert or be killed. We see the rebranding of a lot of pagan rituals to Christian rites. Quite recently, the world celebrated Easter. Easter comes after... it's the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox. So do that what you will. During this time as well, we saw the first Hindu major temple was constructed. I am not going to butcher these names, so you're going to see words come across. But they do really call this time the consolidation of Hindu. And we know Hindu is just a major religion, and is one of our oldest religions that has been beautifully archived. And so that's why it's one of those religions where we say it's one of the oldest. Now, we do also know that outside of Hindu, we know that in Western Africa there's also Ifa. That's one of the oldest still going traditions. But we'll get into that a little bit more, because during this time we saw southeastern Indians and East Africa, really starting a major trade between India, Zanzibar, Zimbabwe, Madagascar, and Kenya. And this was no deemed the golden age of India. And so, which is why we see this more consolidation of Hindu too, so everyone can be on one accord of the practicing religion, because you cannot have culture without having religion. It's just human history, okay? Then at the same time, we have what's going on further in further East Asia. We have Taoism and the six dynasties. And so this is where they're trying to kind of simplify the practice a little bit more. So the 300s is where we get more of this newer consolidation, this more definitive syncretism of religions. And then as we go further on into the 700s, 795 to 819, people in China are converting from their folk religions, converting from Taoism to Buddhism, right? Because we knew about 700 something years ago that Buddhism was starting to get introduced to China through the Silk Road. But due to how do I say this? The socioeconomic classes and the differences in how the spirits and religion shows up for them, more people is like, no, I'm going to convert over to Buddhism, because apparently our folk traditional gods, our Taoism gods, are not answering our prayers. Because if so, there wouldn't be such a huge social class division, right? These people did not like that. They pushed back against the idea of the religion's version of heaven, right? And they're I'm trying to be careful in how I say this, because I want y'all to understand and see the correlation to current times. Okay? But the lower class is basically the lower class people did not like that, because they're lower class, that the religion at the time said that their souls are going to hell. And those who are upper class, they kept saying like their souls are going to heaven. And so they did not like this dynamic in the religion. And so they switched from those, and then they went to Buddhism, where Buddhism doesn't really worship any type of God in a sense. It's more of a spiritual practice and understanding, and like you have more control and free will over your choices. Where during this time in China, the government of that time told these people of different socioeconomic classes that because they are poor, they're not going to get to their heaven. Sounds a little bit familiar, doesn't it? Also, during this time, the 795 to 819, we saw the Islamic Golden Age, right? We saw the preservation of knowledge. We saw Baghdad becoming like one of the main capitals in the world for science and astronomy and astrology and math, and medicine and education. This was truly the booming era for the Islamic empires. And we also find, we get the introduction of algebra, and during this time we get the word for algorithm. And so their cultural understanding of community and education through the religion really begins a stronghold. And this is where the Islamic empire is. That's Persia, and what we now call the correct decolonized version is Marma, not the Middle East. But that is where essentially where war is happening, and why so many people have been in deep grievance about like Baghdad. So yeah. we really, during that time, I think the main thing we really saw is the continuous push and power plays at hand, and everyone looking at, well, how do we want society to be. In China, they said, hey, we're not going to do this anymore, because if y'all say this how it is, I don't want to be part of this. Or while during the in the for those under the Islamic empires, it was like, let's really be on our ish. Now from there, from the 700s to 800s, we go into the, I guess we would say the 1000s, more into modern history. And we have from 1041 to 1063 AD. This is where we get very, very big correlations to modern times. Because from 1041 to 1063 AD, not only is Pluto in Aquarius, but Neptune is also in Aries. That is the current transit we're going through now. That Pluto in Aquarius and Neptune in Aries. Neptune in Aries asks, what happens? What happens when you need a new leader? How do society interact? How does society start to reform and rebuild itself when Neptune in Aries acts? How do you get a new leader? How do you know that is the new leader? Okay. So during this era, Pluto Aquarius and Neptune in Aries. Now, mind you, like I said in the podcast, we talk about Pluto Aquarius, but we also talk about Neptune and Aries and how these things interact with each other during season 1. So I'm going to link that as well. So it's going to be somewhere in the cards. 1041 to 1063 AD. The Byzantine Empire, right, conquers Edessa, which is modern Turkey. The Byzantine Empire, which is basically, as we know, returning it to the Christian hands after 400 years that it was under Islamic hands or empires, or I want us to kind of think about that, think how that kind of relates to now. Okay. So a lot of these things that's been happening, it's history is, we won't say necessarily repeating, because it's not exact, but it is signaling. Let's say that. Okay, there's something called the Great Schism. I'm a little country, y'all. And it is the splitting of ideologies, right? Now, mind you, while we've been talking about the Christianity, we're talking about what we call Catholicism, because Protestantism doesn't come until later on. So when we've been talking about Christianity this whole time, we're really talking about the Catholics, right? And so during this time, we have the splitting of ideologies again, for it to what? Coalesce and be definitive. Roman Catholicism versus Eastern Orthodoxy. Eastern Orthodoxy is what we mostly see when people want to talk about Ethiopia and Christianity, but Ethiopia had African traditional religions before Christianity. That's a whole nother thing. During this time as well, we had aspects of Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism coming together to be synthesized. Then during this time as well, we get the official time recording systems that everybody agreed upon. And so a lot of people talk about new time and everything. But I say, but there was a time that we all decided the big time recording systems of how we're going to record time. It formalized under Pluto Aquarius and Neptune Aries what's going to be the new leader, how are we going to talk about the new systems, who's going to lead it. And then, you know, also during this time, I thought it was important to talk about that during this time, China comes up with the formulation for gunpowder, which totally shifts history. Totally shifts history. So from there, we jump 200 something years from that. It's 1286 to 13 AD. 1308 AD. We have the true emergence of global power due to war, right? Due to these bumping of heads. We see another huge influx of the influence of the Islamic powers, and because due to this, the Islamic powers are moving east at this time. We see the Hindu-Muslim syncretism to try to rescue Hindus at that time, because there were internal conflict going on in India for religious freedom. During this time as well, there are some historical documents that are still around that have not been completely destroyed due to colonization. We see the Congo principalities start to be recorded. This is so important. This is so important. So important. And I just hate that we don't have much of the true history of that part of Africa's like still around, because this is where in the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade for Hoodoo, our theology is based on Congo practices. The Congo cosmogram, the cosmology, the theology is based in that, the foundation, although there's other influences, because the beginning peoples came from the Bantu peoples. So when we jump 200 something years after that, we get into where we do have the transatlantic slave trade, 1532 to 1553. And Neptune is in Pisces and goes into Aries during this time. I think it's the Pluto in Aquarius episode of Astro, Negro, Astro, Black. Listen, I do talk about, maybe we talked about behind the scenes, what is significant about Pluto and Capricorn, and how they relate to the transatlantic slave trade, and the fact that the United States, you know, Pluto return is Pluto in Capricorn at its last degrees. But that's, I'm pretty sure we have talked about that somehow in the podcast. But right here, right now, I'm going to repeat some of the things we said in that Pluto in Aquarius video, but a little bit more in depth, right? So again, we have the significance of Neptune in Aries, Neptune in Pisces. We just got from Neptune in Pisces and what they meant for spirituality and religion. I said during that time, 1532 to 1553, that we really do, I think we start to see the formation of the African diasporic religions due to the transatlantic slave trade, and we took some of our spirits with us. And so we get this another division within Christianity during this time of Protestantism versus Catholicism. We start to see the formation of Sikhism in India. We begin to see the trading of people from a racial standpoint, because there's always been, sadly, some type of enslavement for empires, because it's imperialism, right? But the true trade of peoples based off skin tone in a unscientific, racist, unscientific, it's social construct. Then we see, sadly, we also see, indigenous peoples in oppression with them and genocide of them. But I also want to highlight, before the 1500s, I'm gonna put the name up of the person I'm talking about because I do not want to butcher this name. This is of an ancestor who was what we call a seer we would call a seer at this time. In the 1450s, he was a prophet, a Congolese prophet who predicted the spiritual and physical enslavement of the Bakongo people. And they did fight, but I don't think enough people believed him that this was going to happen. There is nothing going back. I have not seen anything that said how long these people will be in spiritual and physical enslavement. I do believe that we are starting to see that not be with how things are progressing for those of us who are in the African diasporic religions. And we've just really started to see these definitive ideas of what is and what not. I really want to say it's truly the 1500s that is the foundation of modern history of how we think about society. Because thinking back, and I really do think it's because of how much we started to write down a lot more. Because in let me see, where did I write? It was the 1500s we really started to get the printing presses, so written history became so important, and we can now trace a little bit better things. And I just think this era of the 1500s is so important for us, especially those who have been impacted by colonization, and our ancestors have been impacted by colonization and colonialism. But I thought that was so interesting. But we know Aquarius is about definitiveness. It's a fixed star. It wants to understand things from a certain viewpoint, right? So from the 1500s, we jump into the 1700s, 1777 to 1798. We have Haiti, Australia, and the Netherlands defeating their oppressors. We have the idea of democracy. We have this coalescing of what do I want to call it? The secularization, right? The idea of America as a democracy, liberty, justice, freedom, that had to combine with the religious extremisms, the settlers that had been in the U.S. since the late 1500s or the mid 1500s. That had to combine together. So the footing and foundation of America has always been ugly, because you had the founding fathers who were not religious, call it what it is, babe, had to, in order to become into power, merge with the religious extremist settlers who really started a lot of the genocidal things of the indigenous Americans, and of the formation of American chattel enslavement. And so you had two extreme ideas come together to make the American experiment, and you wonder why it's so janky now. But we also get the new idea, and I want to talk about that because that is Christian nationalism. That's where we start to get Christian nationalism. And because the founding fathers did not, which is why they said it's separation of church and state, because everything that they were worried about has come to fruition under the American imperialist regime. These are people who didn't even know how big the U.S. was, and they didn't want to become as big as China, or you're going to lose kind of fabric of the thought process of the American regime. I tell people all the time, the founding fathers would call all of us idiots. I agree. We have Uranus discovered during this time. We have partisanships, so loyalty to a party. that becomes, eventually goes into more like a weird religious thing as well. Listen, the Pluto in Aquarius 1777 to 1798 was, it was just like also just weird, bro. Like, wow. But we see these things kind of coalesce, and we see these things and how they relate, and how religion gets also, it had already kind of been, it had already been combined with imperialism for eons at this point. I mean, like, totally, since really the formation of civilization. That's why we have gods of war. And so we really start to see it formalize into modern, super modern society, and we can really reflect on how it looks for us now. Speaking of now, actually, let's go back to Haiti. We know that Haiti, with the formation of Vodou, Haitian Vodou, and Vodou is, I would say, the child of Vodou from Benin. That is the roots. And we see religion and spirits truly be used to overthrow enslavement. And so we really see these things come into formation, and this solidification of like, okay, this is the religion that we don't play with too quick, right? Since then, people on the imperialistic powers that be have been so afraid so afraid of the African diasporic religions, which leads us to now, right? We currently have Pluto in Aquarius, Neptune in Pisces just left. Actually, one more thing before we go into today. I also personally believe, we know due to what happened in Haiti, there was even a bigger crackdown, harsher. The British Empire, the British descendants were already the brutality of enslavement in the United States is unbelievable. And so we had even a bigger crackdown and even a bigger influx of enslaved Africans to the North American soil. Mind you, during this time, the U.S. had formalized its Department of War, because there were what we would now call militias doing genocidal acts of war to the indigenous for, at that point, over 200 years. So when we get to the success of the Haitian Revolution, the bigger crackdown on enslaved Africans in the United States, and this bigger influx into the North America continental land, we see more the influence of Ifa and Akan on Hoodoo, but also at the plantations, we see this bigger push for Christian conversion on the enslaved peoples, right? We know there was even when Neptune went into Aries during what we call the Civil War Reconstruction era, we saw this a huge push of Christianity in the United States. Once again, Neptune and Aries said, like, who is your new leader? And this is where Hoodoo had to kind of hide itself to continue to help its people. Pluto was not in Aquarius then, but Neptune and Aries kind of solidified the movement further on in the 1800s. But I personally believe, with how the transits are going and what we know was happening at that time, we see Hoodoo being forced to synchronize with the other, like, more cultures coming into the United States. And so we see that bigger influence, and we start to see this ugly, insidious work with the push of Christianity as well. So once again, we go into modern times where Pluto is in Aquarius, but thanks to Neptune and Pisces, because Neptune is at home in Pisces for modern astrology. And so we get a bigger, we do, yes, we do get spiritual religious psychosis, but we also have a lot of people coming home to their ancestral religions. And for Black Americans, that's Hoodoo. And some for you know, in Hoodoo, like all the African diasporic religions, they are complementary to each other. And everybody's not meant to practice everything in this lifetime. And so right now we see Hoodoo going through another reconstruction era where not only is it healing because its people is healing, right? It's one and the same. We see this definitiveness that's happening, this pushback, the pushback you see against Black Americans, because Black Americans have gone through this erasure thing that's been happening over the 150 years post Reconstruction. If you ever taken an African American history course, you know, I mean, if you look at now, you know the erasure that's happening. And so Black Americans are refusing to be erased. And when I say Black Americans, I really do mean those who are the descendant of enslaved people, because we don't have a lot of their history on purpose, right? And so what is happening there, what you're seeing that's happening in the cultural stand of Black Americans pushing back when our own Heritage Month, because everyone now has a Heritage Month within the United States. You want it, this is more definitiveness of what a Black American is. That doesn't mean we're not celebrating the influence of our cousins, of our diaspora cousins, but there needs to be a definition. There needs to be this definitiveness, because my background is in public health. My PhD is in public policy, policy analysis, and public health and equity. So when we look at across the board, there are different health outcomes for different generations. If you've been in the United States, or your lineage has been in the United States since the 1617 or early 1800s, so pre-Reconstruction era, that's the definitives of Black Americans, because your health outcome is different, your epigenetics is different, and so even your religion is different, your spirits are different. And so when we talk about Hoodoo and like this also definitiveness, that's why the definition I have is it includes those influences, but it talks about like you have to understand, you have to have the ancestry, the blood, the spirit, the grief. Everybody wants the joy, but no one wants the grief of being a Black American. And I understand how American imperialism has erased blackness, Black people, and the grief and everything. So you think it's just whatever. So now we have, during this Pluto and Aquarius, because Hoodoo is an ethno-religion, as it is pertains to the ethnicity, the culture. Hoodoo is the culture, conjure is the magic. You have this like thing that's going on, this definitiveness of it. This, you have to define it. We have to understand the tradition. We have to understand where it went wrong, because if not, we will be erased. That is why the Black American struggle is connected to Palestine. It's why we say free Sudan, free Palestine, free the Congo, our ancestral lands. From imperialism, from all these older imperialistic regimes, they're still around. And you know, in the grand scheme of things right now, America will still be around even after it's breaking down and it's falling into going into a fallen empire. And so right now for Pluto and Aquarius, I'm asking, and you know, it's not even just Hoodoo, right? It's the other African diaspora religions as well that are having these very hard conversations about how these isms, these phobias, have all impacted religion due to imperialism from the Pluto and the Capricorn regimes. Okay. Now, when we talk about what I already talked about, how Hoodoo synchronized with this, you know, other cultural cousins. Oh my God, I can't believe I didn't talk about this. in between that time as well, I think I talked about this. It had to be, was it Neptune Aries? I don't know. I did talk about briefly why in certain lineages of Hoodoo, there are strong Catholics and people work with the saints. And I think that goes back to kind of the merging that happened, or the introduction into Catholicism into into that part of Africa right before the 1500s. So I'm saying like the 1430s, and that syncretism started to happen. And because there's not like a definitive date that I could find really quickly, I couldn't see the prominent correlations, but that's why it's not just that in modern times that there were Catholics, but we start to already see the synchronism, because for the now we call the Hoodoo spirits, but the Congo spirits already were smart enough to learn how to synchronize for its people to survive. We need to give our spirits more praise and props. The spiritual technologies are advanced. So that's why even now we see Hoodoo. Right now, I believe we see Hoodoo being definitive and breaking apart from the Christian church, because now we are so many of his people is in a healing portion, and so many of his people is so much more educated on its history that Hoodoo can now breathe. Let my girl breathe. And so we now see this separation from the Christian church to be more definitive in its original, what it was originally supposed to be, not based in Christianity, but based in its true African theology. Now we see still a practice of it merging with something else. And this time, Hoodoo is merging with spiritual astrology. My astrologers, my black astrologers who practice the ATR, ADR religions, for the past 3 years, we have been getting inklings of how our cosmograms look very similar to an astrological natal chart. And if you haven't paid attention, you have been seeing some African diasporic leaders, priestesses, priests, EOS. I really do see. It's really the women who are doing it, who see this correlation, who are deep in the practice, deep in the work, which we know that most of the ATRs are matrilineal. The people are matrilineal. Their descendants are actually naturally matrilineal, but society is so patriarchal right now. We see that tension and push and pull. So right now, Hoodoo is literally synchronizing, right? I do think all the other ATR, ADRs are too, with astrology. So many. Our spiritual technologies are so smart, so advanced, that even before the transits happened, even before, right, that we started to get the downloads. We started to become astrologers. We start to interrogate a lot of the language around astrology, how it is from the cultural lens, because astrology itself also got bastardized through colonization. That's something that people don't want to talk about, but I'm going to talk about it. Me and Liz on our podcast, we like to yap about it. And so what we now see is synchronization happening, is detaching itself from Christianity, Hoodoo is, in its influence, because it is in a space of healing and picking the ones. I always tell people, like, Hoodoo is a birthright to most Black Americans, but it may not be meant for you to do it in this lifetime. Know about it, honor it, continue to do ancestral veneration. Everyone does Hoodoo every day and don't even know it, because you just Black culture, like you're culturally in tune. It's in your DNA. But to practice is conjure is completely different. And so right now, I believe the African diaspora religions are picking and choosing, because they on the spiritual technologies of more, the spirits know more than we do. are gearing us up to continue to survive and thrive with the changing of the times. So I'm not surprised that it is merging itself with the tool of astrology that has been used and misused by imperialistic regimes, that has been bastardized to certain extents, that it is merging itself as like and coming back onto itself because Western and Eastern Africa, well, all parts of Africa really, had their astrological modalities, but that has been lost through time and space, and so now it is coming back in a remembrance. So I think that is what is going to continue to happen during this Pluto and Aquarius transit that we're currently in. Let me know if amongst the other religions you see a difference happening. I do think I think Christian nationalism is going to continue to crumble, to be honest, because so many people, because Christian nationalism is kind of baked, sadly, into the American imperialistic regime. We're going to see that tension with that too. People like, this is some BS. That doesn't make sense. That's why we have separation of a church and state and all of that. And so we're going to continue to see this push and pull, this tension of it all. And so let me know in the comments. Let me know your thoughts. Y'all picking up what I'm putting down? In your respective religions, what are you seeing happen? What changes, what belief systems, what things are emerging, what things are falling? What are we looking at as far as new leadership, not only collectively, spiritually, religiously, systematically? Like what do we see? What do we see? Like, let me know. I know I have private yaps for almost an hour. But let me know. As always, check the description box. I have I have more information in the description box. Check out Astro Negro and Astro Black. And yeah, more soon.